Astrologers Association today. The purpose, as I understand this hearing, was to discuss the TDI data call and the information that provides you as a committee members as you assess these issues. Obviously, the testimony from Mr. Parsley didn't deal with the TDI data call virtually at all because the TDI data call in no way, as the OPIC representative pointed out, the TDI data call in no way supports, represents, or even hints that there is a lawsuit abuse crisis in this state involving hail claims. In fact, just by adding 25,000 new claims to their data set since the Senate hearing, the number of cases or the percentage in which lawsuits or lawyers are involved has actually decreased by 20%. So just by adding new data, we've decreased the number of cases in which attorneys or public adjusters are involved. The reality is that of all of the claims, not the policies, there's millions and millions of more policies, but just of the claims, only 1.7% end up in a lawsuit. And only 3.4% of all the claims made actually engage a lawyer or a public adjuster. Now, if you read the TDI data call, if you heard the testimony, what you hear over and over again are a few things. Number one, TDI cannot come to any definite conclusions on trends. The results are preliminary. The data does not show a systematic pattern. The data does not explain the reason why something has happened. And because this is a projection, it's subject to uncertainty. But what the data does do is it shows that we can't find an actual problem in the issue that's being questioned. The data focused on both 2010 to 2015 in a broad sample set, and then it very specifically looked at data from 2010 to 2015. And the concern that's been raised is that there are more people hiring a lawyer or a public adjuster than before during 2012 to 2015. Yet, in that same period of time, the number of hail claims has gone down, even though this state has suffered 5 of the 6 worst hail claims in the 2000s period. The claims actually have gone down, frequency of claims. Insurers, on the other hand, have been able to make a consistent profit of 13.6% during that period.
So just a quick question. I just want to make sure I understand. Did you just say that claims have gone down, but lawyers have gone up?
In other words, even though the concern is that there's the percentage of claims who hire a lawyer has gone up, the actual number of claims has actually gone down.
Right.
So therefore, hiring lawyers hasn't generated more claims. And
right, but if there are less claims, that means there should be less lawyer involvement, not an increase. So to me, that would be the inverse of what your statement is. But explain it to me.
Well, no, if the concern is that, as Mr. Parsley said, lawyers are driving, there's lawsuit abuse, and there's a driving of litigation frenzy, and there's a generation of claims, then we should see more claims when more lawyers are being involved. But we don't see that. The data doesn't support that. The data supports that there's actually less claims being filed, even though more people have hired a lawyer to help them with their insurance problem. And during the same period, TDI can't identify where that trend has resulted in an increased cost of litigation or increased cost of claims due to lawyers' involvement. They can't find a trend where claims are being reopened more because of lawyer involvement. They can't find a trend where claims are being closed because of lawyer involvement. These things are all happening because our state has had a terrible 4 or 5 year period of hailstorms. And what they've concluded is that any time you have a surge in storm-related activity, you're going to have a surge of claims and a surge of disputes. And as the OPIC representative pointed out, if you take the Hidalgo County example out of the analysis, you don't even see an increase in lawyers.
So why do you think there's an increase in percentage of lawyer involvement then?
I think, well, based on these numbers, it's being driven by the Hidalgo event. Because again, if you take Hidalgo out, then you don't have an increase overall in the number of lawyers participating in the case by percentage.
Right.
And of course, again, we have a much different state over that period of time. We have increases in population, increases in density of population, increase in home values. At the same time, you have reduced coverage. The data points out that the insurance industry over the last 4 years, this 2012 to 2015 period, a period, again, 5 of the 6 worst storms, during that period, the insurance industry actually paid fewer claims that were submitted. They were paying an average of 3.9 claims per 100. Now they're paying 3.5. So they're paying fewer claims. The one exhibit that I handed out that you have in your materials is a page that was provided to the Senate committee but was not provided in TDI's data today. And in that, I think it shows an interesting trend that the committee should be aware of. Again, that document was provided to the Senate. We have a different page. Here.
I know that you provided this, and I know that they also made updates
Yes.
between that packet and this packet. So, we may want to get them, TDI up here again to explain maybe why this wasn't, or look at that, not think that just because it wasn't, it was somewhat intentional. Maybe that this information might have changed. Could that be, or could you give us some background on why,
Sure.
what you think might have happened?
I think it is the inclusion of additional data, and I think it's just the presentation of the data in a slightly different way. I'm not putting any ill intent towards it. I'm just showing that I think that the slide, the page that I've provided shows an interesting trend line that isn't evidenced in the presentation by TDI to y'all. And that's this. We're talking about the closing of claims. And in the slide that you have that we presented from the Senate version, what you see is that the period of time to close claims from reported to first closure over time is going down. So during this period of time from 2012 to 2015, the insurance industry is taking less time to close the case in the first place. Now, that may be a good thing for consumers because they're getting that money maybe quicker. But at the same time, it means that there's also an opportunity for more mistakes because we're taking less time to close claims and we're paying fewer claims per 100 than we historically have over the last 16 years. The other thing that I think is important within the data is that even though there is some evidence of increase in the percentage of lawyers being hired, and again, taking Hidalgo out of that mix, this isn't an unknown phenomenon. Every time there has been a severe hailstorm, you will see some spike in attorney involvement. For instance, in 2011 in Dallas-Fort Worth, there was a tremendous storm. There was a tremendous hailstorm, and the number of lawyers that were hired spiked 52 times the average percentage of lawyers for that year statewide. In Houston in 2010, same thing happened. There was a big storm, and the number of lawyers who got hired actually spiked 41 times more than the average number of lawyers were hired in that given year. So consequently, every time we see a significant storm event, you're going to see some spike involving attorneys and ultimately involving litigation. I think it's important to remember that even though more lawyers may have gotten hired, only 50% of the cases in which a lawyer or a public adjuster was hired actually ends up in a lawsuit. And that's still 1.7% of all the claims made. Other parts of the report that I think are of interest is that there was a concern that perhaps the involvement of lawyers was resulting in claims being reported later. And you've heard concerns about lawyers and advertising and door-to-door and soliciting these cases and basically encouraging people to file suits. The data at page 15 on the claim reporting actually shows that on average, the attorneys are not involved until 8 months after claims have been reported. So we're not looking at a situation where the lawyers are sweeping in immediately after the storm and ginning up the claims. On average, the data says that the attorneys are not getting into the picture on average until 8 months after those claims are reported.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Sheets.
And that number is coming from the TDI data call, correct?
Yes.
And so that's based off what the insurance companies are telling them, correct?
Yes.
So that's when the attorney first sends a letter of representation to the insurance company.
I can only tell you what's based on the data call. I don't know what the information is the insurance companies would have provided.
Okay. So,
or what was done by TDI to verify or determine the accuracy of that data.
So how often do you represent a case where you're representing someone and you don't notify the other party right away that you're representing them?
I don't do insurance litigation, so therefore I'm not usually in a position where I have to send notice, but it's usually after a period where I've investigated and determined that the claim is meritorious and should be pursued.
Okay. So there would be a lag time there between the actual hire date and the date that the insurance company's notified that the attorney's hired.
I think that's fair.
And when you have an incentive such as interest rates and attorney's fees, that also generates an incentive to delay that notification, does it not?
In my personal experience, I don't believe that lawyers have any incentive to delay the opportunity to resolve the case.
Okay. But that's not what we're seeing in these cases.
Well, I'm not sure I understand. So you'd have to tell me what data point you're responding to.
We're not talking about a data point. We're talking about what we saw in TWE, and we're talking about what we're seeing in 2010. We're talking about what we're seeing in 2012 based off your graph that you provided us. When there does seem to be some kind of incentive there to delay settlement or to delay resolution, not for the claimant but for the attorney.
Again, in my personal practice, I don't know of any reason why lawyers want to delay the recovery, the resolution of the case and the recovery just in order to, again, accrue some form of damage or out.
It's called money.
Well, again, as I understood your previous argument, is that the lawyers were ginning up as many cases as they could handle, and they have all these cases.
No, that's not.
Their goal
that's what Mr. Parsley said. Yes.
You know, again, my experience has been that lawyers want to move cases. They want to bring the cases to resolution. I don't know that there is an economic dynamic that would overrule the general desire to move cases forward and have them resolved.
Do you remember during the session, I don't remember what bill we were debating, but there was a bill here where Jason Byrd came up and testified, and I asked him, isn't it true that a certain attorney has made tens of millions of dollars off these suits? And he said, yeah, it's true. And he didn't really want to answer the question. And then when he walked away, he mumbled under his breath, and lots of people in this room heard him say it, try hundreds of millions of dollars. So let's be very direct and be very honest here that money is an incentive for the attorneys, and I don't blame them. I mean, it's called business. The point of business is to make money.
Representative Sheets, every part of this process has an interest in the economic outcome. The consumer is desperate for the money that they're deserved and owed in order to repair their lives. The insurance company is desperately trying to save the money and make money as a company. Lawyers are also entitled and certainly want to be paid for their services. Everyone has an economic incentive. But the point of the data, as I appreciated it, was if there is a concern that lawyers are driving an outcome, then the data says that's not true.
Right.
Because there's simply too few cases in which lawyers are involved to drive the data.
Your own chart, though, dismisses your argument, because your own chart, because you mentioned in 2010 and you also mentioned 2012 the events in Houston and the events in Dallas. And what we're seeing is we're seeing a spike in the delay in the settlement or resolution of claims. And these are cases in which we have plaintiffs' attorneys involved. And so the point is, you're right. In the end, everybody has an economic interest, especially the consumer. And it is in the consumer's best interest to get these claims paid out as quickly as possible. And so the question I would leave for you, and I don't expect you to answer this right now, but as the legislature moves forward on this and you're participating in the debates, is what can be done to reduce the payout time so that the consumer can get back to their life quicker, they can be made whole, and then also make sure we're protecting the marketplace so that we don't see a spike in insurance rates.
Well, and I certainly agree with both of those. I just don't think that there's a data point in here that supports that those concerns are justified based upon the data that TDI has compiled. And that's based on the fact that lawyers are coming into the process generally later. They even say that I think it's 7% where it's shown that lawyers have gotten involved in the very early part of the case. They've also looked at the question of reporting, and the reality is that 91% of all the claims are reported within 3 to 6 months. So again, lawyers are not engaged in that part of the problem. Claim reopenings. There was a concern about whether lawyers were responsible for claims reopening, and the data clearly shows that year by year, lawyers or no lawyers, the insurance industry has to reopen 33 to 34% of all the claims every single year because they don't appear to get it right the first time. And so that's a constant that has nothing to do with attorneys. Claim closings, even with respect to claim closings, the issue of the data showing that claim closings are going down the period of time, even though lawyers' allegedly involvement is increased. But again, the concern is, are we closing the claim so rapidly at the beginning point that errors are being made, which then results in the hiring of more lawyers? Also, they're talked about costs, the concern about whether costs are going up. The cost issue is certainly one that everyone would want to be concerned about, but the actual increase is 2 cents per dollar of premium. All of this 2012 to 2015 period has resulted in 2 cents of every dollar of premium is the increase. And even that, TDI says, they cannot come to any conclusions on trends in the average cost per claims involving attorneys or litigation. What they did show is that the average loss on an inflation-adjusted basis over this period has gone up by 3%. On an average basis by year, it's gone up 3%, while other data would show that the cost of roofing materials have increased 35% on top of a 27% increase in the construction of materials and a 29% increase in the cost of labor. I would like to draw your attention to page 20 of the report. I'm sorry. Is that right? No, I'm sorry, page 39. This is a point that was made by the OPIC representative. Again, you see in respect to page 39 that this is where, again, this 4-year period, the increase in cost per dollar of premium has gone up 2%, so 2 cents per dollar. But if you'll notice, the highest points over the last 10 years are 2009 and 2011, periods of time where there's no allegation that attorneys are driving some lawsuit abuse period. And yet those are significantly higher than the average of the last 4 years. The same is true when you talk about paid claims. This is the point on the next page, where on average over the last 16 years, the insurance industry has paid 3.9 claims per 100, but over the last 4 years, they've paid 3.5, paying fewer claims during a much worse storm period. If you look at the next page, again, although you have an increase in claims over that cost of claims by $30 over that 4-year period, again, look at 2009, look at 2011, significantly greater cost per policy of claim than in 12 to 15 when there's no allegation that lawyer abuse is occurring. I apologize, I've gotten past my pages. If you would flip back to page 20 with me. So this is the point that the OPIC representative was making, and that is, if you hire an attorney, then on average, you're going to receive a claim payment of $31,000. But if you don't have an attorney, then the insurance company only pays you $7,083. So basically, as long as if the insurance industry has a system where they can keep their consumers from hiring lawyers, then they save 77% of what may be owed. And that's the concern that's being raised, is why is there such a disparity in that number? Why are consumers who aren't represented paid so much less in claim value? And to go back to a question that you asked, Representative Myers, the loss expense payment is part of the cost of defense. That's not over on the claim loss side. But there's other data which shows that that number is heavily influenced by Hidalgo County again. For some reason, Hidalgo County not only had more lawsuits, but the cost per defense of those lawsuits was much more. Again, the data doesn't tell us why that's the case, but one could argue that it's because the issues were more complex, that there was more in dispute in those cases, and I think there's a very good reason for that, that I will get to here shortly. But overall, I think this is an issue that the OPIC has identified appropriately as why is there such a disparity?
One question I have is, in that data, is there any way that says that consumer, that policyholder, is better off by receiving more money and hiring an attorney versus taking the initial or even having a case that has an initial payment and reopened? At the end of the day, where's that consumer? Which one is better off? Just because he gets more or she gets more money, I don't know necessarily says that they are better off one way or the other. And I don't think that data supports that one way or the other, do they?
Certainly, we don't know of the
the attorney is better off. And
that's
not being facetious, but I just want to, up here we're concerned with that individual, that policyholder, and in which case are they better off?
Absolutely. Well, for one, and just in general practice, again, this is not my area, but my understanding is that if a claimant, a consumer, has received a payment from the insurance company before they hire the lawyer gets no fee on that percentage at all. So it's only on what the attorney is able to add to the value of that claim and show that the company owed. Now, I understand the question that Representative Sheets asked, and part of your question as well. What portion of this money is going net to the client? I can't tell you that because it's going to be different in every single case based on the fee or how the fee was calculated, what the expenses were, what was required to prove the case. But at a 4.5 times ratio, the claimant's better off. The claimant's going to receive more money than the claimants who aren't represented because they're receiving it on a gross level 4.5 times more money than people who aren't represented.
Mr. Chairman. But you would agree with me that that number is artificially inflated by attorney's fees and expenses and costs related to litigation, correct? You will agree that it is not a straight dollar for dollar. Correct.
Absolutely. It's okay. We don't know how much of those dollars, that increase, is related to actual claim damage to the property that should have been paid in the first place, versus what it costs to achieve that number, to get that money for the consumer.
Sure,
we don't know.
But as a baseline, contingency, most likely, 30 to 40%, most likely. Costs of litigation, which I'm familiar with, pretty high. Expenses, fairly high. I mean, you may say that the consumer is better off, but I'm not entirely certain that is true dealing with litigation as I do on a daily basis and the costs associated with it. I'm not entirely certain, and I don't think you can be entirely certain either.
Even if the client, the consumer, was only receiving 50% of the outcome, they would still be twice as well off as if they hadn't hired a lawyer.
But you don't have any idea how much, again, on average, how much the cost and expenses are. I mean, that 34 could go down to 7 real quick.
Again,
because you take 40% of that already, and then all of a sudden you take another 10 grand in in expenses associated with hiring an expert. Experts are not cheap. In depositions and court reporters and filing fees, that easily can add up to another 10 to 15 grand. So to me, you could literally be looking at 7 to 7 or even less.
And I think, though, the only question I would have is perhaps for the TDI folks is whether or not they can actually obtain that. The insurance company is paying it, so they may very well allocate what amount of it is related to claim versus what amount is allocated to attorney fee regarding expenses. I don't know if they do that, but that would be the place where that data could be achieved.
That's a fair point.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Sheets.
Mr. Blevins, when you do a settlement agreement, do you go in there and you provide the defense with the allocation of where the money's going, how much is going to you, how much is going to pay expenses, and then how much is actually going to the client?
Oftentimes that is discussed because you want to make sure they understand why where is the client going to resolve the case, what's going to be a fair offer that makes it happen.
Is that in the settlement agreement?
The settlement agreement?
Yeah.
I doubt it's in the settlement agreement, but it's discussed oftentimes in the negotiation.
Right. And you think the insurance companies would have that information recorded to provide to?
I can't say that's what my point is. I don't know if they do. I don't know if they do an internal allocation. They may do an internal allocation on their own for the purposes of their books. Even that would give you some further indication, even if it's not completely accurate.
Right. Well, I think the only source for that information, of course, we're not going to get it because the attorney-client privilege would be from the attorneys or from the clients themselves providing somebody, if they're provided an accounting by their attorney, them handing it over to this committee again. But then you still wouldn't have a good sample. So I don't think that's you can put it out there, but I don't think that's something that's any of us could go out there and determine what it is and what it isn't.
And again, my only point is to show, in agreement with the OPIC, that there is some reason to further investigate why claimants who are not represented by counsel are being paid so much less money. That's the only question.
What's the LAE?
My understanding is that's the law. That's the internal part of the cost to the insurance company. Their internal costs, defense costs. That's my understanding. That's where that number's captured.
Okay, and so isn't that the difference between the claim and the settlement?
Not the difference between the claim. It's the difference between the claim payment and the total payment, yes.
Okay. And so what's all included in that?
Again, my understanding of the loss expense payment is that's the internal part of the charges to the insurance industry, whatever their cost of experts, their cost of an attorney, their cost of additional production, which, by the way, raises one of the concerning elements of this data, and that is that if you're not represented by counsel and the insurance company just gets to deal with you, they spend a whopping $195 determining how much money you should be paid.
Right. Well, they don't have to pay for the attorneys at that point. It's all internal costs at that point. Those are salaries that they're paying their folks anyways.
But they're talking about the determining how much damage that should cost, how much the repair cost is, what's the availability. All of that they're doing on a per claim basis for $195.
Yeah.
And they're doing it over a shorter period of time, and they're paying fewer claims than they used to pay before.
And as a claim holder, I think that's a good thing because I'd rather my insurance company spend less money so that I don't have to pay them more so that I can have insurance.
Well, I mean, maybe if they paid more...
You're punishing them in your comments for being efficient.
No, I'm punishing them because they have to, even without attorneys, they have to reopen almost a third of the claims they process. I'd rather they spend a little bit more money and get it right.
Well, let me ask you this. You keep talking about Hidalgo County. Mm-hmm. And you talk about what the average amount received when you have an attorney is and versus when you don't have an attorney. But that number includes Hidalgo County, does it not?
It does. And
then in your other calculations, when it benefits you, you're saying, well, let's remove Hidalgo County from the equation. I don't think it's honest, and I don't think we're going to be comparing apples to apples if. When it suits us, we take Hidalgo County out of the picture, and then when it benefits us, we put them back into the picture. I mean, you got to do the comparison with what you got, and the whole data call that we have shows that Hidalgo County is in the equation, and there is a clear blip in Hidalgo County. And I also think it's convenient that Hidalgo County is probably the latest in time, or the earliest in time event that we have of recent memory where we've had this situation. So of course we'd see that spike and we wouldn't see it in other parts of the state yet.
Well, if we could look to the data, I think I can help answer some of that question. If you would, go to page 43 in the TDI report.
Okay.
Okay. So let's step back for a moment and
now, are we including Hidalgo in this one or
yes,
not?
It's absolutely. This will be my specific discussion on Hidalgo County.
Okay.
So let's step back for just a moment, though, and look at this, because this is now we're in the area of the report where TDI went out and they specified 9 weather-related events, and they wanted 100% of the claim information relative to those events. And 2 of those events were South Texas, the hailstorms in Hidalgo County that were actually of March and April 2012, and the Panhandle claims of 2013. That's 2 of the 9. And if you look at the chart, what you're seeing is, of course, where you see the 9, the 8, the 6, the 7. These are the reference points to this 9 specific events. So TDI reports that in Hidalgo County, there were 30,000 claims paid over $500 million. And in the Panhandle, there were fewer claims, 29,000, paid $316 million. So the Panhandle had fewer claims and they were paid less in total dollars. Yet we're going to look at a series of charts where in every instance, the Panhandle resulted in more payouts than what happened in Hidalgo County. If you're paying more people more money, then you shouldn't end up with paying a higher loss ratio in Abilene compared to Hidalgo. If you go to the next page, the difference gets more pronounced. When we look at the loss per dollar of premium, the amount of money paid per dollar of premium, Abilene now Panhandle is way out in front and above where Hidalgo is. More claims, more money, but less money per dollar of premium. If you go to the next page, and this gets to your point, Representative Sheets, about the dollar mix, go to the next one is look at the difference in the paid claims per 100 policies. It's staggering the difference that a fewer claims paid group of significantly less money, and yet they cost substantially more and paid substantially more on every single ratioed event. So, and I think the industry gave us a really good gave us an insight into that during the Senate hearing, because after our panel came up, the industry had a series of panels. And one of them volunteered that the reason, or a reason, for why Hidalgo County might look different than the Panhandle is because there's a much, much higher concentration of actual cost value claims. So most of us probably have replacement cost insurance, which costs more money. In Hidalgo County, the insurance industry recognizes there was a much higher concentration of only paying actual cost. So that creates a scenario that results in more claims and more litigation, and here's why. You have two events, biblical hailstorms, over two events over less than 30 days, where the large concentration says you have to not simply figure out what is the cost to replace it, but you've got to figure out what it was worth and then depreciate it. You have a much different level of engagement, proof, and dispute opportunities when you're dealing with actual cost numbers than you are when you're dealing with replacement cost. And particularly when you have two events in that kind of close time frame. And of course, you're going to get paid less money as a policyholder, but you got to pay two deductibles. It's pardon the pun, it's a perfect storm, effectively, of a scenario of a high concentration of policies, biblical storms, two different events, double deductibles. People don't have enough money to get their life back together, and so they reach out for help. Again, I can't tell you that's why. Data doesn't tell us why. But that is the best understanding I can give you of why Hidalgo did result in such a different spike. And again, as the OPEC representative said, if you take the lawsuit numbers, the lawyer numbers out of this equation, just take that one and say it is different, and you take it out, then there's absolutely no spike in lawsuits. There's no spike in lawyers for all the rest of the history. Again, and I'll wrap my comments up with this. The other thing that's troubling is, again, premiums statewide going up. No relationship to where these hailstorms are, no relationship to when they occur, no relationship to lawyer involvement. Deductibles going up. Again, no. This is what the data says, this is what TDI says. No relationship to where the hailstorms occurred, when they occurred, or whether lawyers were involved or not. Coverage. Yeah, relatively constant with maybe some areas of decreasing. Certainly not getting more for your dollar. You're getting no more than what you got, maybe less. So you got premiums going up. Got deductibles going up. You're not getting any more coverage for it. All during a period of time when the industry makes 13.6% profit on a 4-year average basis. So the data simply doesn't support an avalanche or a lawsuit abuse, or a lawsuit problem.
Representative Paul.
Yeah, I'm going to go through a couple of things here. You keep saying data doesn't show, but data does show. On page 14 clearly shows 2012, 0.6% of claims have lost lawyers, 2014, 13%. So it clearly shows that there's an increase in cases of having lawyers on cases. So that it does show that. And
just for Southwest Texas.
That's fine. That's showing that's one of the. I just grabbed one of them. But data does show that there's an increase, and that I don't care where it is. It shows that there's a data increase. Even on page 20, what you were showing us, this average loss of this claims is 37,000 to 7,000. The reason that's there, that's the reason we're having the meeting. That's why we're worried about it. Why is this number going up to 37,000? And that's the cost that all consumers are going to have to pay. So I think the data that you're even pointing to shows that there's a problem that we need to address.
And Representative Paul, I'm only pointing out that if you look at the other side of it, isn't the problem equally why are people who aren't being represented paying so much less?
Well, that's just the cost of the lawsuit.
Well, that's not what the lost payment is, though. The lost payment is any additional claim amount plus the attorneys or any penalty. So you've got multiple components in that extra payment. Now, again, as we talked about, we don't know what each part of it is.
I follow you. I'm just saying.
But if there isn't any additional claim loss, then that case is dismissed. No, lawyers aren't going to take claims that there isn't some measurable additional recovery to be made.
I know, but that falls into the system that Mr. Parsley was talking about, because now we come in with thousands of lawsuits. We sue. The system gets swamped. The insurance companies get swamped, and then they settle, and you get these kind of numbers. So this is proof of that example of what that. This looks to me to be proof of that model working, and not that just that for some reason these guys happen to get more because they actually found they had more damage.
I certainly understand that. What I can't get past is that you have a period of time where you have the 5 of the 6 worst storms in the state's history. We can show by the data that the industry is taking less and less time to review those claims. They're paying $195 to determine what you should get as a policyholder on average, and then they're paying 9% fewer claims overall. It's hard for me to conclude from that the problem is in the 1.7% of the cases that actually have to file a lawsuit to get what they deserve.
Yeah, I mean it does to me, and you know the TDI. We even asked them that, hey, did you notice that there's any kind of additional storms? They couldn't say that there's any kind of additional storm. I don't know where this biblical thing came out of it, but we all know that we have hailstorms all over the state of Texas. We have hurricanes hit the state of Texas, and those things are going to happen.
I have a report from the Texas Insurance Association that identifies the storms by gross dollar value, and that's where I get my 5 out of 6.
Okay, that sounds good. If you can show it to us, that would be great. I'd love to have it. But also, that dollar value is including the losses due to these lawsuits?
It's their data, so I don't know what it includes. But again, keeping in mind that only 1.7% of all the claims go to a lawsuit, so therefore there really isn't any way, and TDI makes this comment several times, that the number of claims in which attorneys are involved is so small that in different sampling assessments, it's too small to be valid. It's too small to get a right number because the variability can be so great. So there's just not enough claims that involve lawyers and involve lawsuits to drive any of these numbers.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Representative Munoz?
I guess I just had a question on the interest fees and attorney's fees. How long has that been around?
Again, not my area. My understanding this is like a I don't know. Representative Sheets knows the answer to this.
1991, I think.
Yeah, this statute has been there for a long time. I know one of my colleagues up here could tell you it's been around for a long time. In fact, this provision has been around and been such an important part of allowing consumers, to hold their insurance company responsible and accountable, that it even wasn't adjusted during the tort reform of 2003. That's how central it is to protecting consumers.
Well, and the only reason I ask is because I know previously you mentioned Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, and the spike during those years. And if the issue was the attorney, I don't know if going back was this brought up or was this addressed, because if it's been on the books that long, I I mean, I don't know what the difference would be seeing more attorneys involved in Houston and not addressing it versus seeing it more attorneys involved in Hidalgo County and then not wanting to address it.
I mean, the spikes definitely existed over time, but again, there are multiple charts in here where you look at 2012 to 2015 where the perceived problem is, and the numbers, whether it's number of claims, number of dollars, number of anything, they are well below 2009 and 2011 where there's no perceived attorney problem at all. So it's not the attorney issue that's driving these concerns.
Well, and that's why I was asking, because I think in the time that I've seen it, I was trying to get some history on it and see, well, was this brought up, was it addressed during those times, if that was in fact what the data would show, and you know, that's one of the issues that we're hearing today. The other question I have is, I mean, there's got to be obviously a lot more information behind the data call that would have to be addressed. Would you agree with me? For example, I mean, the amount of money paid in Hidalgo County versus other parts of the state, there's got to be a difference, right, per claim?
Yeah, I think you'd love to see some additional data on why in those charts, for instance, the Panhandle, by ratio, was treated so much differently, it appears, than Hidalgo County. And again, I really think you may want to know this cash value issue, this actual cash, and I'm probably not saying it right because it's not my area, but you know, it's the difference between getting, you know, recoupment cost, I mean, you know, replacement cost, putting you back to where you were, as opposed to what was it worth and how far was it depreciated. And that's a much more complicated question. It takes more experts. It engenders a whole level of disputes. So I think you'd want to know about that concentration of those kind of policies in Hidalgo specifically.
And I guess that's just my comment on the difference, or maybe the disparity in trying to compare one county versus another. I mean, there's so much more behind it that would be necessary for people to really give it the proper assessment. And I mean, you know, you talk about Hidalgo County versus Dallas, other parts of the state. I mean, the socioeconomic status is much different. The population is much different.
Yep.
The type of policies are very much different than what you're going to see in Dallas. The type of companies even that write are going to be a lot different. So I think maybe sometimes in the discussion that needs to be also brought to the table, and hopefully through TDI or through somebody, they can actually give us that information or give the committee the information, because I think all of that is necessary for people to make the proper assessment and to really dig down and see, okay, why is there a difference and what's behind it? Because sometimes I don't think that makes it into the conversation that I've heard from others.
Absolutely. It is a multifactorial issue, and the only reason that I would ever have suggested pulling Hidalgo County out is just to show that if you take that one piece out, then the lawyer rates are back to historicals. I think there are a multitude of reasons why Hidalgo, for many of the reasons you just stated, it's unique. It is specific. It is unique. It does deserve to be studied more, and that may give us some more answers that have nothing to do with lawyers and lawsuits and tort reform and the statute that need to be addressed.
Well, and the only reason I say it is because I mean I'm from there, and I mean we're treated differently over so many aspects, you know, on higher education, on education in general, on insurance, on, I mean, so many different facets across the state. Border security is looked at differently in Hidalgo County than somewhere else. So I think all of those things need to be part of the conversation for people to really understand the background and the area that you're talking about.
Yes, sir.
And I just wanted to make that comment.
Representative Meyer.
You're a plaintiff's lawyer, correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
If you were to try any type of plaintiff's case, are there particular counties in the state of Texas which are more favorable to a plaintiff than others? By way of example, would you prefer to try a personal injury case in Hidalgo County versus Collin County?
Well, I'd certainly rather try one probably in Hidalgo County than in the Panhandle.
Fair.
But really...
Would you say that? Would you agree that there are certain counties that are more favorable to plaintiff's lawyers?
There's a lot that goes into whether or not a claim will do better or worse in a particular place. The one thing about insurance claims is that there is as the data has shown, as the work that Texas Watch has done has shown, there is a high level of dissatisfaction and suspicion of jurors, of claimants, of consumers, and of policyholders of how they're being treated by their insurance company. So it may be one case that is well received virtually universally.
And getting back to quickly the point you kept making about 09 and 2011, do we know, and it may be in here and I might have missed it, do we know if possibly the reason that there are higher claims is because there were more storms?
Again, only from the data that I'll provide, that Texas Insurance Association. I mean, again, that's not where the largest concentration storm was. There was one in 09, there was one in 11, but again, the lawyers weren't the problem, though. That's my point, is that all the data points are higher in those 2 years, but yet the lawyers aren't the issue.
Right, but if you have bigger, badder, more storms, you'll probably have more claims than if you have less storms, and that has nothing to do with the lawyer. So my point is, your contrast on the data, there just could have been bigger, badder storms in 09 and 11 than maybe there were between 12 and 15, correct?
My appreciation is that 5 of the 6 biggest are 12 to 15. That's the way I see the data.
Right, but my question to you is, do we have any data as to 09 and 11 as to size of storms and number of storms?
No, sir.
Okay, but that could be an explanation?
Certainly, I agree 100%. More storms, more claims of all kinds.
Okay,
100%.
Very good, thank you.
You bet.
Members, Representative Paul.
Yeah, one just last question. If the lawyer thing is so small and so insignificant as you said, this 1.7%, and knowing that the state of Texas is not going to interfere with the ability of a citizen to be able to sue his insurance company, why would you be opposed to us changing any of this legislation if it's such an insignificant issue?
Because the disparity between the insurance industry and the individual policyholder is so great that without those protections, they never get to a balancing of the scales of justice, ever.
This $34,000, $7,000 number.
No, in terms of changing the statutory laws that are available and changing the rights that are given to consumers in the state. The reason why, again, while it's only 1.7% end up in lawsuits and only 3.4% hire a lawyer, the disparity between the Goliaths of the insurance industry and the common individual person is so great that without those benefits and protections, they never get to a point where the scales of justice are even.
I'm not following you on this Goliath thing. So, I mean, we're not going to interfere with the ability of any individual to sue their insurance company. That's not going to be a problem. I don't follow you what this Goliath thing is.
Then I must have missed what it is, what you were suggesting we could change.
Well,
what should we change?
I think we just need to make sure that we don't have a problem with lawsuit abuse, of people having thousands of lawsuits and suing and causing the consumers to spend thousands of dollars extra over their course of their career.
And again, I think the data points out that we don't have a lawsuit abuse problem at 3.4% hire an attorney and 1.7% file a lawsuit. What I'm suggesting is that if you change the laws, then you put the consumer who does need to pursue his insurance company, who does need justice, if you change the laws, then you take away the only protection that they have.
We'll probably disagree on the fact that if we're taking that away from him, but I don't think we will. But I was just trying to get out, if it's such an insignificant thing, why would y'all even be concerned about it?
We're always concerned when individuals aren't being given the tools that they need to protect themselves and to enforce their rights.
All right, that sounds fine.
All righty. Well, Brian, thank you for your testimony. And next up is